This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
Incivility is on the rise. Some work to curb it by calling people out and asking others to reject those people or institutions. Anyone can cancel anyone else, and it's happening across both the faith and political spectrum. Today, we're talking about cancel culture on Family Life's Inside Out, where we look at how God transforms his people from the inside out. I'm Martha Manikas Foster, and my guest today is author, attorney, apologist, and former Muslim Abdu Murray. He's the founder of Embrace the Truth, which is dedicated to Christian apologetics and evangelism. Abdu Murray has been our guest before in 2016 and 2019. Welcome back, Abdu, to Inside Out.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Martha. Thanks for having me on again.
I am so glad to be talking to you about this because, Abdu, those who engage in cancel culture say that calling people out is an act of accountability. And, I can resonate a little bit with that. It forces offenders to recognize that words and actions have consequences. I think we can agree that there's a lot of incivility in our culture, and there are fewer recognized standards for how we treat each other. People who cancel others see it as a tool to encourage appropriate speech and action. And, I have some sympathy for that. How do you see canceling? Is it a good thing, an exercise of free speech, an outlet for the disenfranchised, simply a form of boycott, or is it something closer to bullying?
Yeah, thanks. Great question, by the way. I love the way you put it, especially with regard to the words of standards, recognize standards for how we treat each other. What cancel culture has become is I think, a quite biblical act of holding people accountable, but run amok in this sense, that we do need to hold people accountable. We need to hold ourselves accountable. I think the difference with cancel culture and accountability is that cancel culture tends to work on people's ideas, expressions of ideas, and their associations. So someone happened to have said the wrong thing or have been around the wrong people, and so we cancel them. Whereas accountability does hold people to account for even their ideas, but mostly for their actions. Here's the main difference as I see it, is that cancel culture is public erasure. There's almost nothing redemptive in it. It's an act that looks a lot more like revenge than it looks like accountability. And I think here's a subtle difference between that and I think accountability. Accountability tends to be a little slower. In the Bible, we have standards for holding folks to accountable or holding ourselves to account as well, where we go to somebody to try to talk about their behavior, their actions, their ideas, or whatever it is. And sometimes we can't because some environments are unsafe, and I understand that. But then in either instance, we bring someone along or we bring it to the church. We try to bring spiritually mature people who have some stake in what happens here to the person who is being held accountable and to those who have been offended and trying to vindicate them as well and see what we can see in terms of discernment. And I think that's the key watchword here. Cancel culture tends to operate quickly on very little facts and is meant towards the public erasure of another person. Accountability tends to be a little slower and it tends to be a little more deliberate. And I think the watchword here there's two watchwords, discernment and redemption. Are we interested in discernment or are we interested in someone's ruin? And I think cancel culture tends to be towards someone's ruin. And I say this, Martha, with one other thing in mind, and this is just part of a biblical understanding of how difficult this can be for us as human beings who are not the all-knowing, omniscient God. We have the word vindication, which means to see someone and to see someone's wrongs, that they've been wronged and they've been hurt and offended. We want to vindicate the victim by acknowledging the wrong and trying to rectify it. Very closely worded with vindication is the word vindictive. And vindictive, of course, is angry retribution with no hope of redemption. And because the words, as a nice word picture, the words sound so similar, vindication and vindictive, that I think that not only do they sound similar, but the words look similar. So we have to constantly ask ourselves, what are we doing this for? And why am I the one who's specifically doing it?
I like how you emphasize that it takes more time to do it in what I would say is a more biblical way. There's something about, we could talk all day about what happens on the internet because it's easy to click and send, right? So if you take more time, you're going to be able to think about it, to say whether or not this is really the direction you want to go in. I would imagine in most cases, you're not going to lose anything if you took more time.
Yeah, typically that won't be the case. And in fact, with the age where you can click, retweet, share, post, whatever you want to post, oftentimes there's facts that are missing. And oftentimes there's a flocking mentality that happens. I remember seeing an article about these things called murmurations, where you have these huge flocks of birds that tend to follow in different times and different flocks with a lead bird. And there's been studies that show that a lot of social media interaction, specifically in and around a cancel culture mentality, tends to follow the same patterns as there's a sort of a mob mentality that takes over into these things. And so cancellation happens when there is this public erasure that follows up on mob mentality, whereas accountability is a community act, not a mob act, a community act.
Well, we're talking here about following the Jesus way, how we do accountability, how we go to somebody as an individual, taking someone else, and then with the church and the community. As followers of Jesus, we are called to humbly serve others, and we're called to live lives dedicated to the only true God. So here's a couple of questions that I feel are rooted in that. How do you encourage Christians to respond in a culture that cancels people who we as Christians agree are really out of line? I mean, there's a real temptation or a pull to say, yeah, let's join in that canceling. And then what about when what we as Christians do or believe is the target of cancellation? What about when we're canceled?
Yeah. So cancel culture only works if you cancel people. And if you refuse to cancel them, you can still hold them accountable. I think the answer to the first question is that we are to live these lives dedicated to the only true God. And the only true God, if you look at Jesus' life as an example, and even Paul the Apostle, Paul called people out by name in the Bible. So we have biblical precedent for this. But I got to imagine, based on his own strictures of how he handled things, is he tried to handle things as civilly, but also as redemptively as humanly possible until he saw maybe there was no way to get there without the church being in danger. And the church being in danger is a very high standard. I mean, think about what you have to do to have someone be a danger to the church, generally speaking. And you typically bring more people involved. Right. So we do have to do this. And so we agree that some people are out of line. And I think we can do it with like corporate boycotts, and we can vote with our pocketbooks, as it were, when it's important. However, we always have to think redemptively. How can this be redeemed? What if attitudes change? What if behaviors change? What if we understand someone is repentant of something, but maybe not exactly the way we want, but they are repentant of something? Shouldn't we give credit to that? Shouldn't we see that maybe this is a process as opposed to cancellation, which is so quick and so fast?
Yeah, at least leave room for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a good friend of mine once said this, is that I always want to make it easier for someone to sincerely apologize rather than harder. And sometimes cancel culture makes it harder for someone to sincerely apologize. And then the second one is that what if what we're doing as Christians, or we do or believe is being canceled, how do we react?
Right.
I think through prayer and discernment, we have to figure out whether or not we double down on what we're doing. And in fact, don't cow to canceling, because canceling is all about making you afraid of standing up or doing the right thing. And I think as community, we have to follow Jesus' example. John chapter 9, the man who was born blind was canceled because he followed Christ. Yeah. Jesus refused to do that. And so here's where I would say we can be encouraged as believers that when we're doing and believing the right thing, that though cancellation may come, just remember something. Jesus has a very high sensitivity to those who are canceled. And like he did with that man born blind, he was put out of the synagogue because he believed in Jesus. If we stand up for what's right and we do it in a redemptive way, Jesus will recognize us, and he will bestow on us the kind of heavenly honor that is a much better substitute than the cheap honor that is bestowed upon us by hypocrites, including ourselves. So we look to him and say, I can't be canceled. I literally cannot be. If Christ is for me, who can be against me?
That's beautiful. I think what I would pull from that is also that it might mean that you won't be, you or I or whoever is being canceled, might not be vindicated. I'm going to use that word. Our reputation might not be shiny again in this world. Yeah. But that our real care should be about what it is in the eyes of Jesus. Is that a way to extrapolate what you're saying?
I think that's absolutely true. The phrase, it's been repeated many, many times, You can't always control your reputation, but you can control your character. And I think that's exactly right. Are we looking forward to the culture saying, oh, please keep buying my books, or please keep watching my videos, or let me into these things or these clubs? And as painful as it can be to be rejected, the real issue is, are we looking to Jesus to say, well done, good and faithful servant?
As always, it is wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Inside Out. You've given us a lot to think about.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
My guest has been author, attorney, and apologist Abdu Murray, founder of Embrace the Truth, an organization dedicated to apologetics and spreading the Christian faith. I'm Martha Manikas Foster with Inside Out on Family Life.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.